What's up, everyone? My name is Ale. Welcome back to my world of stocks. So one of the stocks that I've been getting asked to talk about a lot recently is, of course, Nikola. Now, this is a freshly IPO'd company that not only dabbles in electric vehicles, but even more so in hydrogen fuel cell technology. And that really excited investors early on and sent the stock soaring by over 200% at one point. Meanwhile, I've been kind of sitting on the sidelines, just eating my popcorn and watching all of the volatility unfold, because this is a stock that, again, just barely IPO'd back in June. And this stock was about $30 a share, went all the way up to over $90 a share, and then proceeded to crash by close to 70% all the way down back down to just the $30 range where it sits today. So knowing that this is a stock that climbed so extremely high and then proceeded to crash by almost 70% today, is this a stock that I'm finally ready to buy myself, or will I continue to sit this one out? Well, to find all of that out, we're going to have to do a deep dive on the company, their business, their financials, and their valuation. All of that plus my opinion and what I'll be doing myself in today's video should be a fun one. I hope you guys enjoy. We got a lot to cover, so let's just go ahead and dive straight into this. Okay, well, taking a look at the stock, their ticker symbol is NKLA, and you can see that they used to trade for as little as $10 a share, but that was actually a different company called Vector IQ, which was a sort of investment company led by former General Motors executives that were trying to invest in the smart transportation industry. So they decided to merge with Nikola. It was like this mergement company that would try to merge with another company. And so they did that with Nikola, and they created this new stock of NKLA just about a month ago on June 4th. And when that happened, the stock was trading at around $30 a share at kind of the lowest points there, but then proceeded to skyrocket all the way up to over $90 a share before crashing all the way back down to those IPO levels of around $30, which is where they trade today. So overall, it's just been this like really extremely volatile stock. Now, the company itself was founded back in 2015 and were named after the famous inventor, of course, Nikola Tesla, which is obviously shared with Elon Musk's Tesla company, who also took the name. Well, they took the last name. But that's not the only similarity that they share with Tesla, as they also focus on designing and manufacturing renewable energy vehicles, except Nikola aims to make not just battery electric vehicles, but mostly hydrogen electric vehicles, along with drivetrains, components, and even storage and fueling station infrastructure as well. But we'll come back to all of this in just a second. First, I want to cover the valuation, because Nikola is a company that has yet to sell a single vehicle or generate any meaningful sales. Yet, when looking at their market cap, they're already worth around $11 billion and were recently worth even more than like $30 billion. They were actually trading with a market cap that was even higher than Ford, believe it or not. Not to mention that even at these much lower levels, they're still worth about the same as NIO, who is a pretty exciting startup out in China that's already been selling very nice EVs with great technology. Not to mention that back when Tesla had already released the Roadster, Tesla's market cap was only around $2 to $3 billion, and yet Nikola hasn't made anything yet, and we're still trading for around 15 times that amount recently, when their market cap was over 30 billion just earlier this month. But when looking at sales, all of these competitors look like they're in another universe compared to Nikola. In billions of dollars, Nikola only generated 0.0005 billion last year, and I'm not even sure where that money came from, because I know that they didn't make or sell a single vehicle, and yet something like Ford, which again actually had a smaller market cap earlier this month, did over $150 billion last year alone. If I did my math correctly, that would give Nikola a price to sales ratio of over 22,000 even at these lower levels, while giants like Ford and GM are actually less than 1, and even Tesla is like a tiny 10 by comparison. Now, granted, you obviously can't value a stock like this because they haven't really sold anything yet, but I'm just trying to make the point that this isn't like some little penny stock with a tiny market cap. They're being priced for tremendous growth in the future, because even if we just magically gave Nikola like $100 million in sales, that would still put their PS ratio at over 100. In other words, this is not a very cheap stock, especially considering that Nikola has been losing tens of millions of dollars every year and close to $100 million last year alone, as that number continues to get larger and larger without any sales to help offset it. That being said, it can't be all bad news, right? I mean, this is a stock that many investors fled into early on without really any regard for the current valuation, instead focusing solely on future potential. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about their business, what they currently do, what they aim to accomplish in the future, and then we'll finish up with my opinion on whether all of that justifies the current share price and if I plan to invest in them myself anytime soon. Let's go ahead and jump into that right now. Okay, so like I said before, they focus on both battery electric vehicles or BEVs, as well as hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles or FCEVs, with the battery ones set to begin production next year in 2021 and the hydrogen ones a couple years later in 2023. Now, we're going to go into the differences between the two technologies in just a second, but first, I just want to quickly touch on a few of their biggest products. Again, none of these are in production yet, but they should be coming online within the next couple of years. Now, you'll notice that their headline products are all trucks, and that's because, in my opinion, that specific market is just easier to break into, especially when you're talking about those big Class 8 semi-trucks. See, those are usually owned in large fleets by already large and well-established companies, and because so many of them try to not only lower costs, but also lower emissions with how popular this whole kind of climate change movement has become, it's easier to go to those corporations and say, look, we've got these electric trucks that require less maintenance, maybe save you some money on fuel, while also lowering your emissions, which you can use for marketing purposes to make people like your company and buy your products. And overall, it's just easier to sell a larger number of these trucks in bulk to these giant companies. In fact, Nikola claims to already have $10 billion worth of orders, although I'll just note that those can easily be canceled. They're not binding, they can definitely be canceled. But Anheuser-Busch alone is the largest, I believe has the largest of those orders with 800 trucks. That's a pretty big number there. Now, this is a big deal because the market is worth a ton of money, which we'll also talk about in just a second. But while we have this article up from Forbes, I'll just quickly note that they estimate Nikola will do 150 million in sales next year and then over 3 billion by 2024. But even if we added the 150 million that they predict next year, that would still give them a PS ratio of 73. So it's still kind of high. Granted, that could fall quickly if they start bringing in billions, but that's really the question of how successful they'll be in meeting all of these goals, with still a very new technology that we'll also talk more about in just a second. But going back to the heavy truck market, there's no question that there's a massive opportunity for them, as just in the United States alone, Nikola estimates that their total addressable market will be worth $130 billion and a whopping $600 billion globally as well. So if Nikola is able to, and by the way, I wouldn't trust those numbers to be, they put in a lot of stuff into total addressable markets to kind of inflate the number. But the point is that they are big markets either way. But if Nikola is able to disrupt some of these markets in a major way, then we could see explosive growth, in the future that quickly drops the valuation of the stock and makes today's prices look much more reasonable. And not just that, but the more sales that they generate will in turn raise capital for them to reinvest back into the business and launch even more products. Eventually, we could be talking about a Tesla-like situation where they're even releasing cars and SUVs for the mass consumer market as well, which they seem to be interested in, as they've already opened pre-orders for a regular pickup truck called the Nikola Badger that will launch in North America with fully battery electric or hydrogen electric options. But reservations, I believe, can be canceled. They're only about $250 at the lowest end, and they still haven't revealed how many reservations they have so far or even where the truck will be made, since Nikola doesn't even have their own manufacturing facility yet, as they don't expect to finish their Arizona plant until 2023, but that's looking like it will be strictly for their large semi-trucks, with the Badger pickup truck likely going to an OEM partner, so they probably won't even be building it themselves either. But because they plan to release their first semi as early as next year, that's looking like it'll have to be built through a partner out in Germany. So they won't even be building those themselves yet either. But that's really the story with Nikola. They just simply don't have any of the groundwork or the infrastructure built out yet, and that makes them much more risky. In fact, even their technologies are somewhat questionable. Now, I'll do my best to explain what hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles are, but just try to bear with me because I'm not an engineer by any means. But from what I gather, they're actually pretty similar to just regular kind of battery EVs in the sense that they also use electricity to power an electric motor. However, where the difference lies is that hydrogen cars use what are called fuel cells that run on hydrogen to produce their electricity that powers the motor, with the only exhaust or waste product essentially being water. So the vehicles themselves are basically like zero emissions. EVs or battery EVs, on the other hand, would use an electric battery running on pure electricity to do the same thing. So in other words, battery EVs use an already charged battery to produce electricity, while a hydrogen vehicle uses hydrogen gas that is stored in the fuel tank that gets used in the fuel cells to produce electricity. And there's definitely a lot more to that, but I'll try to dive a little bit deeper in just a second. But that's just kind of my simple explanation so that you know at least some of the differences. Now, you might be wondering, well, why is there a battery pack in this image of a hydrogen car then? Well, it's obviously a much smaller battery than what you would see in a fully battery electric car, but in hydrogen cars, they're mostly used to recapture some of the energy that is produced from regenerative braking to make the vehicle more efficient, and also provide some supplemental power as well. I don't think most hydrogen vehicles have plug-in capabilities for the battery, but that can actually be implemented if the car company decides to. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the Nikola Badger will include one, since they claim to carry a massive range of up to 600 miles that is achieved through both 300 miles on hydrogen and then another 300 miles on battery. So it'll probably have a plug-in. And hey, that's actually very impressive because you can theoretically get some of the benefits from both if you do it that way. Now, on Nikola's product page for one of their semi-trucks, they break down a comparison between a hydrogen electric truck, a battery-only electric truck, and then a diesel power truck. And you can see that both the hydrogen and battery versions carry more horsepower and torque than diesel, that's obvious. But the hydrogen truck actually has way faster charging, or to be technical, it would be like refueling, but it even does it at possibly less time than even diesel, and of course hours faster than battery. That's a huge advantage. It also carries much higher range than battery as well, while even matching most of the diesel's range also. On top of that, you get less weight because hydrogen gas is obviously super light and the fill tanks are not as heavy as bigger batteries, while also putting out the same acceleration as batteries. So if true, those are some very large advantages that you can get from hydrogen over, just regular battery or of course diesel. However, there are some big concerns with hydrogen that also need to be considered. For starters, there's really no hydrogen network set up across the country yet, so Nikola would likely need to launch in specific markets, which will limit their overall target audience, at least to kind of start out with. For example, I pulled up a map from the US Department of Energy of hydrogen fueling stations, and I could only spot them in California and Connecticut. That's pretty concerning. There's a lot of open space there. That isn't to say, though, that a network won't be built out in the future. In fact, Nikola themselves previously said that they would build at least 700 stations by 2028, but that's still going to be a very long and costly process. In fact, according to Forbes, those stations could cost tens of millions of dollars each, so it's not going to be an easy feat by any means. And probably the biggest criticism of hydrogen has been efficiency. As you might expect, Elon Musk is not a big fan of Nikola, as he recently tweeted that fuel cells equals full cells in response to a chart from Clean Technica that demonstrates the inefficiencies of hydrogen vehicles. Zooming in on that chart, we can see that overall efficiency for battery vehicles is as high as 73%, while hydrogen is as low as 22%. Now, my interpretation of this is that once the electricity is harnessed, which by the way, a lot of times happens with fossil fuels, but that's a story for another day. We just kind of need renewables to take off more. But anyway, going back to my interpretation, once the electricity is harnessed, by the time that the hydrogen vehicle is actually able to use that energy or that electricity, close to 80% of that energy has already been lost. So you'd have to not only generate an enormously higher amount of energy at the source, but you'll also have to be dramatically improving all of the conversion technologies over time to try to improve that efficiency, and that's going to mean higher costs. Could easily get passed down to the consumer as well. It could also mean more machines, more parts, more work, and again, higher costs. I wish I could tell you guys that I know exactly how all of this will play out, but the truth is that it's just too hard to predict whether or not hydrogen will ever be a viable option for vehicles in kind of the mass market. And if so, when exactly that'll be and how much it'll disrupt the battery market that continues to improve with battery prices dropping over time. But going back to Musk though, during a 2015 interview, he explained it as being very difficult to make hydrogen, store it, and use it in a car, as hydrogen is an energy storage mechanism and not an actual source. He went on to say that electrolysis is an extremely inefficient energy process that hydrogen technology uses. If you charge your battery packs from solar directly, compared with trying to split water, take the hydrogen, dump the oxygen, compress the hydrogen with extremely high pressure or liquefy it, put it in a car and run a fuel cell, it's about half the efficiency and it's terrible. That's what Musk was saying. Now, Nikola's CEO has previously responded by simply saying that most technologies take 10 years or more to productionize. So hydrogen technologies just basically need more time to mature and become more efficient in the future. But again, I'm not an expert on this field, but just given how controversial the technology is, it's hard for me to personally invest in Nikola without being more knowledgeable on these different technologies that they're investing so heavily into or that they want to. And that's ultimately the story with Nikola Stock. Are you willing to take the risk on a new technology that isn't really proven yet and on an infrastructure that isn't built out yet to help the company be successful? At least not yet. So for me, Nikola still has a lot of risk and they still have a lot to prove. Now, that isn't to say that they don't have a lot of major advantages over battery EVs with their hydrogen technology, especially the two biggest ones being charging times and range. But I still think that a lot of those issues can actually be solved still with even with battery EVs. For example, I think charging will continue to improve and get faster. I think battery technology will also continue to improve as well. And then there's even other companies out there like NIO, for example, out in China, that they use a battery swap technology and they can actually swap your battery out with a fully charged one in less than 5 minutes, and that's much faster than even hydrogen refueling. On top of that, I really think that most charging is going to be done at home anyway, even going into the future. If you have a house, you'll be charging at home while you're sleeping or while you're watching TV or doing anything else. And even if you live in an apartment, I also think that apartment complexes are going to start to build out charging stations in there as well. So I really think that's kind of the future we're headed towards, where charging isn't that big of a deal. I also think most people don't drive big ranges every day. I think they mostly just kind of drive to work or drive to the store, and it's not long distances. And anybody who does go on a really long road trip and does have to stop and charge, well, you can take a break, you can get some food, you can get something to eat. There's things you can do while your car just kind of quickly charges. And again, I think the charging will improve over time and become faster and faster. So I really don't think that these issues will be huge limiting factors for battery EVs going into the future. However, where I do see a pretty big advantage for Nikola and their hydrogen technology is, number one, if they combine it with battery and you start to get advantages from both. But number two, more importantly, they do need the infrastructure in place to convince people to buy them. That's going to be the difficult thing to solve. And where I think they can actually solve that is with semi trucks and with logistics and shipments and transportation and things like that. Because if you have predetermined routes for these trucks and these shipments and whatever else for the whole logistics system, then they can build out a smaller network that kind of proves the concept, and then they can kind of expand from there. So the semi-truck industry market, I think, is really big. The whole logistics market is really big. I think Nikola could put a dent in that, and I think they could have some success there. But that's where I really see Nikola having some success, is with like semi-trucks, not so much with the mass consumer kind of casual, everyday, smaller vehicles. But anyway, those are just kind of my thoughts. Right now, I really think that Nikola is just a high risk, but possibly also high reward spec play. And if you're looking for a spec stock, then you might want to research them, research more of the technology. And if you really like their technology and you really believe in the future of hydrogen, then it might be worth taking a shot on. But for me, I don't feel experienced enough or knowledgeable enough on the technology to be making any kind of smart investment on the stock. So I'll be staying on the sidelines, but it is a stock that I will continue to watch. A very interesting company. But if I was looking for a spec play, I'd probably prefer Neo, to be honest. And of course, I'm still very happy with my Tesla shares, so I don't really feel like I have to go into Nikola at this time. But in the future, if they start to become more successful, I might change my mind. So anyway, those are just my random thoughts. I'd love to hear what you guys think down below, and let me know how you feel about Nikola or anything else. And thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button. It really helps the channel a lot. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.